So we are here today to break down the series finale of HBO's The Third Day, titled Last Day the Dark, where OC has a new mother, we get a family reunion, and Helen is willing to do whatever it takes to protect her family. We're going to talk about that and much more. Episode 6, series finale of HBO's The Third Day, was titled Last Day the Dark. With the battle of power brewing, Helen comes face to face with what she's been searching for since she's arrived on the island. When the sisters are separated, Tallulah witnesses a gruesome act of violence, and Elle learns about her mother's hidden agenda. Tensions rise, a fever pitch for all those on Osea Island. Helen and her girls make a desperate final attempt to escape. Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot here today to share with you all my series finale review, breakdown, and recap of HBO's The Third Day. We're talking Last Day the Dark, an episode I've seen twice now, and we are going to break it down scene by scene. I'm so excited to talk about it in the spoiler discussion. Before we dive into the details, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. That way you can stay up to date on what's going on over here at Movie Files. If you are new to this channel, welcome to Movie Files. I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, and while you're at it, hit that bell so you don't miss any of my other HBO TV coverage, other movie reviews, TV reviews of other sorts, as well as live streams and all the fun things we do on this very channel. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Helps out the channel, but I also really appreciate it. And in the comments, guys, let's discuss this series as a whole, but more importantly, let's talk about your pros and cons of this finale, and were you satisfied by the ending? Let's break it all down in the comments below. So again, I want to actually thank everyone that tuned in to my live stream Monday night for the finale. We watched it live, we broke it all down, had such a great conversation. And if you saw that video at the end, I kind of mentioned I was kind of lukewarm on the finale, but after rewatching and digesting the episode, taking down some notes, I've kind of come around to the episode, and we're going to talk about it in this breakdown. But again, I just want to thank everyone that tuned in last night. And if you didn't get a chance, check out the replay. It was a great time. It was a great conversation amongst the wonderful people a part of this Third Day community. So with that being on the way, let's break this down, starting off with the recap. The episode actually picks up immediately after events of last week, where we saw Sam overlooking the water, and we see that awkward reunion that we've been waiting for. Helen and Sam have a conversation. So we see in this conversation, Sam is obviously curious on why Helen is at the island, but then in doing so, he explains to Helen why he's on the island, that he's the father of OC, and that this place is incredible. And oh yeah, their son is on this island, which obviously shakes Helen to the core. At first, she doesn't believe Sam because, as we've seen in previous episodes, Sam has had these episodes where he doesn't know how to grieve with the loss of his child. And also what we find out what happened to his child in regards to how he was lost, who he was on the phone with. This is a conversation about this episode that I'll definitely dive into at the back half of this review. It's how people deal with grief. Now, I talked about it in my watch along last night, how Helen deals with it and how Sam deals with it, and how Sam gravitates towards this island and how Helen doesn't, right? It kind of reminds us of the story of Sam's grandfather, going away from the island and not wanting to have this responsibility, and how the brother stayed there, kind of similar to them, the two dynamics between Helen and Sam. But we'll talk about how people deal with grief later on. But very important conversation, but that conversation is broken up due to Mrs. Martin, who we'll talk a little bit about later. So Mrs. Martin tells Sam that Jess has given birth to their child, which we'll talk about, and Helen wants to see Nathan. And obviously we see Mrs. Martin wants to switch that conversation because she knows it isn't a good idea. And at this point in the episode, again, if you watch that watch long, I was extremely nervous to see Helen's reaction to seeing her son for the first time, which we find out how long it's been. But also, remember the last time she talked to her son and saw her son, she said that he wished he was never born, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the show does an excellent job of building tension as we slowly see Helen and Sam going up the stairs. We finally enter the room. We see the room is filled with very disturbing pictures, and there's Nathan, the boy. Obviously, Helen sees this boy, and she says, Sam asks the boy, "Do you know who this is?" And he says, "Yeah, that's my mom," and says to her that she looks older. And I'm just looking at Helen's face this whole time. I'm just thinking, like, I know the last time you saw him, you said some very mean things, and you also thought your son was dead. But there was a weird interaction, right? She didn't seem to embrace the fact that her son's alive, and we know why. So after Helen is reunited with Nathan, her son, her and Sam go outside and have a conversation. And in this conversation, we see Helen explaining to Sam that this is not their son. Nathan has been taken when he was 6, and that would have been, or he was been gone for 6 years where he was 10. That would have made him 16 years old. So obviously, This kid was a 16-year-old. Obviously, she brings up that he doesn't even have the same skin complexion. And Sam, his kind of reasoning is he has the same hair. This is our son. And again, this goes into the conversation, a much deeper conversation about the human mindset, right? And how we deal with grieving. Some of us embrace the grieving. We pour our hearts out. We cry for days, for weeks, for months, for years. We never recover. Some of us bury ourselves in work. Some of us bury ourselves in whatever distracts us from what happened. Some of us move forward. Some of us have to be the strength, the anchor of the family, which Helen is to this family. Because we see what Sam, you kind of feel bad for Sam, especially in this conversation when we find out what actually happened to Nathan, how he was taken. But we see that this burden has really brought down Sam and really kind of mess with his mental health. And he wants to believe whatever it is. He believes that boy is his son. And we'll talk about the mysticism and the supernatural element of who that boy actually may be. So we see Sam proceeds to tell her that this is indeed their son and that this island is special. Again, he goes into the hair being the same, the drawings, and he spent time with this boy. And this boy is indeed his son and their son nonetheless. And then within this scene, it made me really think about all those sequences earlier in the season when Sam saw this mysterious boy and he can never make out his face, and he seemed to be drawn to this son, right, or to this boy, this mysterious boy. And it really makes me curious about this whole mysticism and this kind of angle that the show takes in regards to belief. You're willing to believe anything to break your grief, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. In this scene, guys, this was such an incredible scene, and again, the acting in the show is absolutely phenomenal. But Helen gives us more information about the day that Nathan was taken. As we see, Sam recalls that Helen brings up the point that the day that Nathan was taken, he was on the phone for 23 minutes and 17 seconds. Now, I'm pretty sure knowing this show, that number has some type of significance, as well as the number 14, the birth date of this new child, which we'll talk about in a bit, the age of the daughters of the show, Ellie and Kel. So there's a lot of numbers. I'm pretty sure if I haven't read the Bible in many years, but I'm pretty sure if I looked at the Bible, those verses 23, 17, 14 probably mean something in regards to the symbolism of the show. So going back to that 23-minute, 17-second conversation, it is brought up that Sam was having an affair, and it has seemed to have many affairs in their relationship. Helen mentions that this family has been broken for years, and it's been 3 people in the family and 1 parasite, being Sam, who is going to embrace the darkness in the show, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So going back to the question of the last second half of the show, why is Helen on this island? Is it for her son? Is it for closure? But we find out her true motives on this island is for the money. Now, she says we know it's $40,000, which sounds like a lot of money to go through to get on the island, especially everything she endures. But I guess if you convert that into like US dollars, I think it's like $100,000, as someone mentioned in the comments of the live stream. So I hope it's worth every penny, right? Because this is a lot of trauma on this family. Going back to her motives and why she brought her daughters with her, I've always said from the very beginning when we met Helen and we saw she brought her kids, I always took it as her using her, I don't want to say using, but in a certain sense, she didn't know what Osea Island was all about and the dangers that was on the island. But I always took it as her bringing her daughters with her to show Sam, this is what you're running away from, and this is the money, this is the food you're taking out of your daughter's mouth. So I felt like they were there to represent the failure of him being a dad and how he's leaving his family home. So just the best thing you could do is just give us the money. So that's how I always interpreted her bringing her daughters to this island. So this is a big moment here because we saw this kind of switch in the character last week, and definitely so much so in this episode. The switch of Jess becoming this kind of wholesome, sweet, innocent girl who's trying to protect her daughters, trying to get her daughters back. At the same time, she's kind of having this fling with Sam, but she made that switch last week where she just became the mother killer of the island. We see Jason talking to Jess, and we learn that she has named the baby Tallulah, which is obviously the name of Jason's daughter, who sacrificed her life as she believed that she was curing the island. So many people brought up in the comments on the live stream, why do we think she named her that? Well, I think, number one, this is one of many ways that Jess is manipulating the people that are grieving. Again, this show is about how characters deal with grief. And we know that Jason's lost his son to this island, being that the replacement of Nathan's body. We know what happened to Ebola and her beliefs and believing that if she died, the island's going to be cured, the world's going to be cured. So again, she's playing on the fact, Jess is very smart. And this is what cult leaders are all about, right? They know how to prey on those that are in their weakest state. And that's another thing about this island. Remember, the creation of this island was they wanted to inhabit people on this island that were at their lowest point. They wanted to relieve their pain grieving. So I think Jess, knowing that Jason's daughter just recently passed, naming my daughter, which her daughter used to be, I'm going to get you on my side. Now, what I love about this next transition from the scene, so we see Jess manipulating Jason. In the very next scene, we see Kel manipulating Elle, and it's just like, the tree doesn't fall too far from the apple, right? Or the other way around, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, where we see Kel manipulating Elle, very similar to what her mother did in the previous scene, as she tells her that Elle is a part of the island, that she believes in the island. And also we get confirmation from something I predicted a couple weeks ago. Who sent that email? Well, it was revealed to be Kel, as she tells Elle that your dad has changed my mom, and maybe if your dad leaves the island, we'll get my mom back, which is very interesting to go into the point of neglection. Again, dealing with this kind of process of parenting within the show, right? The mothers and fathers of the show. We realize that, Jess has this new child in her life now, and it seems like she's kind of neglected the daughters that she's been fighting for this whole time, right? But she seems to care less about where her daughters are, where they, we don't even see the little girl, her other daughter. But it's very interesting to see that kind of in the reverse on how Sam has kind of embraced this new child and kind of forgot his two daughters, as well as, I don't want to say Helen's forgotten her daughters, but she's so driven on getting this money, as we know in previous episodes, she's kind of putting her daughters on the background, leaving them in rooms, leaving them just to kind of wander the island. So it goes into this kind of theme again. When you are kind of focused on something or you are grieving, you are easily to forget what's most important, which is family. So we now see the islanders beginning to go wild, as we have to remember the island was created for criminals to go there to relieve their pain and to free themselves. So we are now seeing that in the modern time, where we see Alan and his mother getting brutally killed, and Tallulah seeing this murder taking place. So we're now seeing the islanders relieving their pain in a certain instance by killing two innocent people. And also within the scene, no one's leaving this island, as we see them burning up the cars, blocking off the way to getting off the island. So now at this point in the episode, I'm realizing this might not end well for our favorite characters. We get a brief moment of seeing Tallulah seeing all this, and she's so smart, right? We see that she goes back to the place where she remembered, where she was safe. She grabs a knife, hides under the bed, blankets herself up. Tallulah is so smart. She's been the killer of this episode in particular, but also in the season. These little actors in both the shows, Elle, Tallulah, Kel, all the kids actors in the show have been phenomenal. So this was a very interesting scene here and a very cool imagery. It reminded me a lot of Cersei of Game of Thrones. We see the new mother of Osea on her throne in the church as she introduces Elle to her new sister. And in doing this, she tells Elle that her mother, Helen, has been lying to her again. Jess is manipulating everybody, right? So she tells her that, but she also tells her that her mom is suffering and going through some grief, and that's why she's kind of neglected her and treating her like a stone, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And Jess proceeds to tell Elle that she just wants the family to be together. She just wants to talk it out, right? She says that she knows that there's tension on the island. She blames that tension on Elle's father, Sam. She also goes into depth in regards to the island's sickness, and she wants to save Sam from the darkness inside of him, which we'll talk about that darkness in a little bit. Briefly going back to Tallulah, we see that she sees the islanders have weapons, they have guns, and she knows it is time to get out of there. Again, Tallulah was so smart in this episode, and such a great little actress, Charlotte there. We see that she goes to the Martin's pub, I believe it's the Oyster, and that's, again, she's so smart because she knows that's where the last time she felt safe. Remember in episode 4 when her and her sister and her mom was lost, had no food, had nowhere to sleep, but they went to the Martins, and that's where she last remembered being safe, being fed. So she goes there, and we know that's smart on her part because she gets reunited with her mom and dad, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So yet another incredibly acted scene by Naomi Harris as Mrs. Martin fills her in on what actually happened to her son. So within this scene, we find out that the previous father, impregnated a young girl and had this child who we know to be Nathan, the boy. Now, my question to you all is, was Paula the mom of Nathan, the boy? Do you guys think that that's what happened there, or is there someone else entirely, or do we think that the previous father got Paula pregnant? Let me know what you all think about that theory, and let's have a conversation about that in the comments. But things get more tense within this conversation as Mrs. Martin explains to Helen what happened to Nathan. And again, going back to the acting in the scene, seeing Naomi Harris, hearing this information that we knew what happened to Nathan a couple weeks ago in episode 2 or episode 3 when it's explained to Sam what happened, but seeing Helen's reaction, it's almost like she lost her son again twice. Hearing how he actually went about dying, how the idea was to obviously take Nathan because he was going to be the apparent heir of the island, but obviously that didn't happen because he was killed. And then the thing that really kind of broke me and also broke Helen, obviously, in the scene is finding out what they did with the body, which they left Nathan's body on the shore for the water and the sea to take him, which we'll talk about the water embracing his body, which hence might be the fact that we saw Nathan on the boat when she was pulling her family. We'll talk about that when we get there. So as we see Helen getting these news, is cut short by the cowboy warning them that the people are coming. And then we say goodbye to a very interesting character, a character that had some good moments, that was ultimately him and Mrs. Martin. I wouldn't say they were bad people. I think they were just protecting, especially Helen, they were protecting her from the truth because, number one, her husband impregnated another woman. Number two, they know the island is going through a war. So I think at the end of the day, I wouldn't say the Martins were bad people. But either way, Mr. Martin volunteers himself to kind of cool down the people outside. But unfortunately, he goes outside and he is axed in the chest by Jason, and we proceed to see Jason kind of violently kill him. And of course, Mrs. Martin sees this and is absolutely terrified and absolutely heartbroken to see her husband die right in front of her. Going back to more of that manipulation again, we see Jess telling Elle about her mother treating her like stone and that she should stay on the island and help her with her plan. Again, seeing evil Jess was really scary. I think all the performances have been incredible, but seeing that switch, if it was another actress, I don't know if they can pull off that switch, because to me, Catherine Waterston just has this kind of very motherly, kind of nice person, very easy to approach. But seeing her make that switch, you can see how a little girl would be easily manipulated to her taking on her plans, which we'll talk about now. So we see Jess's plan play out as Elle sets up her own parents to have this private meeting. And within this meeting, we see Elle calling out her mother about lying. We see Elle is now kind of speaking the words of Jess in a sense about the island being perfect, about her lying. And we also see, again, going back to grieving, Elle has grieved herself. Now, Tallulah didn't know Nathan, but, Elle did, and she is feeling neglected. She's feeling like her parents have forgotten her, which, again, goes to Kale, goes to other parents that feel like they have, or I should say the kids that feel like their parent have distanced themselves for either another child being in the mix, or like perfectly like Jess tells Elle that once Tallulah got in the picture, Tallulah was almost like a replacement for Nathan, and in doing so, having this new child, Elle is put on the back burner. So again, it plays into this overarching theme of the show, and in particularly this finale, that people that are grieving have their headspace is not in a good spot, right? They can either, like I said, go the direction of Helen, being the force, being the anchor of the family, or go the direction of Sam, which he believes that this boy that doesn't look anything like his son is his son. But we'll obviously talk about who that boy actually is in a little bit. And again, more incredible acting by Helen as she tells Elle in this scene that I didn't leave the family. I might have seemed cold, but I was protecting the family. I was providing you guys with food on your table, and I am the anchor, unlike your father that has forgotten his family. Now, as we kind of move forward, we see Larry coming in as we see that this is indeed a setup, and Larry takes Sam and Helen to talk to Jess. So we get this very interesting family reunion as Jess introduces the Islanders to her new child, Ebola, who will be announced as the mother of the island once she's old enough. But until then, the island will embrace Jess as the new mother of the island. Now, Jess explains to the Islanders that she wants to have a clean slate. She wants to have the truth with the people on the island and wants to move forward. We see that the Islanders kind of accept her somewhat of an apology, accepts her word, and they walk away. But then we see Jess again being completely conniving and manipulative and evil. She looks at Mrs. Martin and says, those words I said doesn't apply to you, right? And as I was watching the finale last night, I'm just like, why is she so gun-ho on killing Mrs. Martin? The only thing I could really think about is that Mrs. Martin was the big reason why some of the Islanders were on Sam's way and wanted to have him be the father, and obviously that goes against Jess's beliefs in regards to her daughter. So I think it just came down to she knows that Mrs. Martin is a little bit more stronger than the other Islanders, and she's not as easy to manipulate. So what does a ruler of power do? They take out the people that can revolt them. They take out the people that can cut them under their legs. So, we see that they drown Mrs. Martin, making it seem like they didn't kill her, but she committed suicide because she just lost her husband. So I think that's why she ultimately decided to take out Mrs. Martin. I had to mention this because everything up to this point has been super heavy, super dark, very, kind of scary to the point with people killing people left and right. But a little bit of levity, a little bit of comedy as we see Jess tells, Sam, I'm going to allow you to stay on the island, but make sure that when you come out and say hi to people, at least you comb your damn hair. I thought that was it wasn't a significant moment, but I thought it was a pretty funny moment considering all the heavy stuff that we got within this show. So we see Helen and Sam are brought back to the oyster, and Helen tells Sam that, Elle reminds her of Sam so much, and she wishes she can just rip out everything of her dad's personality out of Elle. And in this conversation, Tallulah to the rescue. She has her knife. She uncuffs or unties her mom, and we see that they're going to get Elle. So we see within this rescue mission, we see that Helen wants Sam to save their daughter. And in doing so, she gives him a knife and says, essentially, you need to do this because you lost my child. You lost our son, so you need to redeem yourself. And now here comes the darkness. So that darkness that we've been talking about for weeks from the very beginning, we finally see it. As we see Jason is the one that's keeping an eye on Elle, we see Sam walk up to him and proceeds to kill him. And not just a normal way, killing him, knocking him out, getting him out of the way, saving his daughter, but he embraces the darkness. And it even says so much so before he kills him and stabs him numerous of times. And for me, this reminds me of episode 3, which I'm showing you guys on the screen now. You guys remember this mural, this picture here showing him embracing the darkness, having 2 knives in his hands. Now, this is where the show gets into that more supernatural, mystical elements, as we'll talk about the true nature of who Nathan could be. Let's get into that a little bit later. So we see the continuation of Sam's darkness as we see him killing Larry and another guy in the church in cold blood, shooting them in cold blood. And again, the last time he was in this church, at least from the last time we saw him on screen in episode 3, he saw Ipola's body. So again, that picture of him embracing the darkness, him now embracing darkness, Sam has now went to the dark side. And I don't think there's any way of him coming out of that. We see Sam decides to give Helen the money and tells Helen that he took the money, but he doesn't give a reason why he took the money. He just says that he just wanted to be there for if their son arrived home. So we really don't know why he took that money. Again, let me know your thoughts in the comments, but he really doesn't answer Helen's question. But this is a very interesting moment. We see this moment where as Helen goes away, she has the money now. Also, too, I don't know if you guys realized that the bag of money was the same color and sequences as her son's shirt, Nathan, which we saw Sam having in episode 1. But this is where things get a little bit mind-blowing for me personally. You see Helen leaves the church, and the little boy Nathan tells Helen, I know you didn't mean it. I know you wanted me, which is the same line she told her son that she didn't want her son to be born last time she saw Nathan. So that goes to a couple things. Number one, this is the reincarnation of Nathan. First, we know this island is special. We know that this is the soul of the world. If his soul was able to be transferred to this new bloodline of the older father having a child by Ipola or some other child, and he was able to bring his spirit into that Nathan, or this goes back to the idea of these people on the island believe anything that is said to them, especially from the father. I believe that conversation was a private conversation between Helen and her child Nathan, but I don't know, maybe Nathan told his dad what his mom said, and maybe, Sam told the little boy to say that to her, because again, they're grieving, they're easy to manipulate. So let me know what you guys think. Is it more of the supernatural, the soul of the world, that Nathan was reincarnated to this boy Nathan, or was it a matter of just he told the boy to say that to Helen to make her a believer of a sense and make her kind of stay on this island to believe that that is their child? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So as we wrap up the finale, I mean, this is truly a moment saving her child. We hear the stories of the mothers lifting a car up to save their child, fighting off a bear to protect their family. This is that moment. So as we see Helen and her children trying to get off the island, they get on a boat. There's no other way to get off this island besides swimming across this island. I know some people were confused. They think Helen went back. She was circling back. No, I'm pretty confident that she made it off the island, because we even see, Elle looking out of the window of that house, and she was looking back at the island. So I am to assume that they have made it off the island. But even before we get to that point, this was just like incredibly acting. Again, Naomi Harris, I know a lot of people were down on her in the first couple episodes because of why she brings her daughters on the island, but you can't deny her performance. And seeing her swim across that water, protecting her daughters, was just so emotional and such a gratifying moment for that character. And again, it goes back to the two different parents, how they protect their family, how one was there for their family, the anchor for the family, and didn't let go and didn't, give up on the family, and that was Helen. And we saw what Sam did. He neglected his family. He walked away from his family to create another family. So in this moment, we see Helen being the hero, swimming. We see that she's starting to lose kind of energy. She's freezing. She's dying. But she hears a voice say, "Mom, I'm cold." And as she turns around, she sees her son, Nathan. Now, for me, I interpreted that scene as, again, more of this going to the supernatural element of this island, the soul of the island. Remember that Nathan's body was last seen or put into the water, the sea. And for some reason, I think that this is the island kind of giving her closure, seeing her son from the last time she saw him when he was a little boy, seeing him for the last time. And that was kind of her push of energy in honor of Nathan protecting her two girls and living on their life. So that's how I interpret that scene. Let me know what you guys thought about that moment when she saw Nathan on the boat. So as the finale wraps up, we see Helen is hyperventilating. Her daughters are keeping her warm within the blankets. We see the sun coming into that cabin that they're in, assuming that, that they're safe now. Also, I don't know, again, going back to my Nathan, that shirt and that bag being the same color, we see that she doesn't grab onto the money like, "Oh, I finally got the money." I took that as her, again, that bag looked very similar to Nathan's shirt, and her just saying, "I have you close to me." She saw her son for the last time. She has her girls with her. They're now safe. Now, that's the finale. What does the rest of it mean? So I'm just to make a theory as far as the Islanders go. I think Sam and Jess are going to figure things out. I don't think that Sam's going to die. I don't think that Jess is going to die. I think that now that Sam has embraced the darkness from what the Islanders wanted him to do, I think they're just going to go ahead and now embrace him as their father. And I think Jess is going to probably fall in line. If not, again, Sam has embraced the darkness. If she doesn't fall in line, she might be a goner. So I think the Islanders are going to just kind of go by Sam being the father forever, however long. I don't know. The cops may be called. Helen may call the cops on them and, arrest everyone on the island. But, of course, they might get rid of the bodies. So who knows? But I am to assume that it's a happy ending for at least Helen and the two girls. And we'll see. I don't know what the future holds for Sam and the people on Osea Island. Maybe they'll shut it down. Even though it's a beautiful island, maybe they'll shut it down and everyone goes to jail. But overall thoughts of the season. The finale, again, first time watching it, wasn't the biggest fan. It's kind of lukewarm on the finale, but the more I thought about it, when I rewatched it, when I took down some notes, it goes to show, again, how people grieve and how people handle with grieving. And we saw that throughout this episode. The two different parents, we saw how parents neglect their kids, how parents, don't see themselves being wrong or doing the wrong thing. We see how Sam reacted to him losing his child by embracing this new child and just forcing himself to think that this is his son. We see that Jess has this newborn daughter, Ebola, and neglects her two daughters. We see, again, even Helen when she protects her daughters, but even within that kind of her being on the island, she kind of forgot them at times, right? So it kind of goes to show when you're in this mindset, when you're grieving, when you're in pain, sometimes you lose yourself. And we saw that without the show. So I thought that the episodes were fantastic. I thought this was an incredible journey. Yes, it's a slow burn. I do think that the winter wasn't as strong as the summer episodes. I do think episodes 1, 2, and 3 were a little bit stronger, more cohesive, more stronger stories. Visually, I thought that the summer looking colors are popping. Visually is a little bit more stunning. So I think that the first half was stronger than the second half. But the second half was still incredibly strong. I think the acting from Naomi Harris was fantastic. The addition to the little girls were fantastic. The story of, again, how two people can perceive grieving between the father and the mother was very interesting. So overall, I thought this was a fantastic series. The finale wasn't as satisfying. There are still a lot of questions on the table. Who was Jess's husband? Was Ebola the mother of Nathan? And there's a lot of things still kind of left on the table. But I think overall, I like the idea that we can just kind of imagine what we think happened. We can kind of think what we want to think. And that's the thing, too, about this show is belief. You can believe what you want to believe. You can believe it to the point that you're willing to kill people. You're willing to make people force your religion on them. So it goes into the belief system of what this show has to say in regards to an overarching theme. So the third day was an incredible journey. The production was phenomenal. I didn't watch the autumn episode in its entirety, but from what I saw, it was incredible filmmaking as well as the other 6 episodes. So for me, this was a must watch and a surprise hit for me for 2020. And I definitely know the show isn't for everyone. I know a lot of people are somewhat disappointed at the finale, but for me personally, after rewatching it, it was a pretty good finale for me, and a good bow to end up this story. So this is a finale. This is a series finale. We're not going to get a continuation, but I hope that we get more of these creators behind the show, Dennis Kelly and everyone else that worked on it, get some of these actors back, and maybe they'll do more projects in the future. So that's my thoughts. That is my last review for the third day. I want to thank you all for tuning in every single week, watching these reviews. I want to thank those that tuned in last night for the watch along, for, again, liking these videos, sharing these videos, commenting, giving me your theories, your predictions, all that fun stuff. Let's continue the conversation of this show and of this finale in the comments below. Thank you guys for all the support. Make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other coverage. Just because the show is ending, I still cover a lot of TV, so keep an eye out for more TV reviews, movie reviews, live streams. Again, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.